Coming up on Network Africa. Mali wooing its neighbours to get around ECOWAS and EU sanctions. Chad's transitional government released 250 rebels ahead of national peace-building talks. Plus, South Africa Parliament fires suspects freed from psychiatric hospital and moved back to regular prison. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. Mali has been making overtures to neighboring Guinea and Mauritania as it seeks allies following last week's decision by the regional bloc ECOWAS to impose sanctions. Mali hopes Guinea will be receptive as it too has been suspended from ECOWAS following a coup last September, while Mauritania is not an ECOWAS member. A large delegation went to Conakry on Monday and another to Nouakchott on Tuesday to discuss ways to ease the movement of people and goods. Besides Guinea and Mauritania, the country shares borders with Algeria, Burkina Faso, Niger, Ivory Coast, and Senegal. This move comes after the military government announced a 4-year delay to elections originally planned for February following coups in August 2020 and May 2021. The sanctions include the closure of the vast landlocked West African countries' borders and a trade embargo. The EU's special representative to the Sahel says the door needs to remain open for dialogue with Mali, despite planned sanctions over a failure to hold elections. The two sides have not made public any schedule for talks, even as existing economic and political sanctions have nearly isolated the landlocked West African Sahel nation and cut off its access to financial markets.
The European Union and its partners say they do not want to isolate Mali, despite the EU saying it plans sanctions in line with those imposed by ECOWAS. The West African bloc brought in tough measures against Mali earlier this month, and that was after the junta, which seized power in May 2020, dropped a proposed February election and said it would stay in office for another 4 years.
We have made it clear that we want to see a proper democratic transition. On the other hand, as well as the ECOWAS that has applied very strict sanctions. But on the other hand, of course, we must continue to keep a dialogue with Mali, because we don't want an isolated Mali. We want a Mali capable of overcoming this crisis. And of course, we have always been on the side of the Malian population. We have always invested a lot in Mali, in development and security, and therefore we want to continue to do so.
But the EU's special representative to the Sahel, Emanuela Del Rey, said the door also needs to remain open for dialogue.
We need to keep our doors open, while reaffirming constantly that there are certain principles and certain objectives that cannot be negotiated. We do not come to compromise on the democratic process, that's certainly.
A spokesperson for Mali's government said it was also open to talks. Thousands of Malians took to the streets in Bamako last week to protest the action taken by ECOWAS. The sanctions have seen borders closed and Mali cut off from financial markets. The country was already struggling after Al-Qaeda and Islamist State-linked militants hijacked a Tuareg rebellion in 2012. Despite the presence of thousands of international troops in the Sahel, insurgent attacks have continued. Hundreds have been killed and swaths of territory ungovernable.
The terrorist groups are able to control territories is because they offer some small example of welfare, which, of course, in a way obliges the local communities to surrender to the imposition of power. And this is something on which we all have to reflect. So governance, I would say, is the key to everything. And we are working very much in this direction. The European Union is investing a lot financially and also with its own resources of competencies and interventions in this field.
Del Rey said the EU was investing financially with its own resources, and the Malian people need to see an acceleration of programs around areas such as governance to tackle the root of the crises.
The transitional authorities in Chad released from prison the first of some 250 members of armed groups they had promised to set free under an amnesty. Chad's Justice Minister Ahmad Mohamed led a short ceremony at a prison near the capital, where 22 detainees who had been convicted of taking up arms against the government were released. Rebel groups have been invited to join national peace-building talks, which are due to start next month. The amnesty was proposed following President Idris Déby's death at the battlefront last April. Chad's Transitional Military Council is led by his son, Mohamed Idris Déby. The UN Human Rights Office is warning that the human rights situation in Sudan continues to be of serious concern, with peaceful protesters killed or injured on a near-daily basis by security forces, as well as a clampdown on critics of the authorities and on independent journalists. Credible statistics from the Central Committee of Sudan Doctors show that 71 people have been killed and more than 2,200 injured by state security forces during protests since the October 25, 2021 military takeover.
Our Joint Human Rights Office in Sudan has also noted a pattern demonstrating that more than 25% of those injured were hit directly by tear gas canisters. This raises concerns that security forces are firing tear gas canisters horizontally, directed at individuals, in violation of international standards. As the High Commissioner for Human Rights has stressed, meaningful, inclusive, participatory dialogue is urgently needed to ensure a swift return to civilian rule in Sudan. The people of Sudan must be able to participate in shaping the future of their country.
A three-day peace and reconciliation conference organized to address a long-standing, mostly cattle-related violent conflict in Mundari, Central Equatorial State, has ended in Juba, South Sudan. The gathering, co-organized by the United Nations mission in South Sudan, brought together key stakeholders as a result of violence in Terekeka County, which has seen an influx of cattle and their owners, leading to conflicts over scarce resources. UNMISS is stepping up efforts to help end fighting among communities in the area, not least by supporting local authorities and church leaders in trying to stop the proliferation of small arms among civilians by means of voluntary disarmament.
We must aspire to start writing a positive history about ourselves. We must start dreaming and bringing together for us to develop a people-centered roadmap for Terekeka to give direction of hope for the coming generations.
The church has come in to supervise and to help them attain peace, and therefore I call upon especially the intellectuals and the MPs, people who are representatives of the Mundari community, that let us give peace a chance. Let us be part of this. By all means, let us be part of the implementation of the resolutions of the conference. I'm asking the Mundari people to own this. It is their peace.
And over in Kenya, Kenyans are demanding answers from authorities after several decayed bodies were pulled out from a river in western Kenya in recent weeks. Families missing their loved ones have started reporting to the local police headquarters, hoping to identify the bodies, some of which are badly decomposed. Police say that incidents of decomposing bodies being recovered from the river have been going on for 2 years. However, according to media reports, police investigations had yet to reveal those responsible or the motive behind the killings. On Tuesday, activists went to the Yala Sub-County Hospital, about 40 kilometers northwest of the lakeside city of Kisumu, and said they counted 20 bodies recovered from River Yala, which had been unclaimed. But in a statement on Tuesday, the National Police Service said it had cases of only 19 bodies being reported over a period of 2 years. There's much uncertainty as to what happened to these bodies amid allegations that most of those recovered showed no signs of torture. And Kenyan journalist Cyrus Mbati joins us now for more on this. Hello, Cyrus. You know, the police say the bodies had been left there over 2 years, but that doesn't explain how they ended up in the river. Is the police saying there's been no cases of missing persons over this period of time? And what more are they doing to find out the origin of the bodies and who has been dumping them into the river?
Good evening. Yeah, the police are trying to bring a narrative that these people were dumped there for the last, or they have been collecting the bodies from the river for the last 2 years. And the explanation is that none has come forward to claim the bodies or to identify the same. This is simply because most of the bodies are badly decomposed and that are beyond recognition, or are in a bad state that you can't be able to identify. I mean, the police get many cases of missing persons, basically on a daily basis. But now, given the state where these bodies are found, it's difficult for one to be able to tell that this you are a kin, your friend, or so. So the narrative they are trying to front, to them it's holding, of course, saying they have been there for the last 2 years. I mean, but to the activists and those who are concerned, the narrative does not hold in any way, because claiming that the bodies have been there for the last 2 years, or the recovery has been done for the last 2 years, does not hold any water. This is simply because the witnesses are saying the bodies were being collected there since July last year. Those are people who were there to dive, then they stumble on a body coming up from the water. The bodies are tied in a sack, or they have been badly injured. So, but then you can't be able to identify them because some of them are decapitated in a way. So it does not really explain how and who is behind the dumping of the bodies. But then the suspicions are that it could be state agents, and the people targeted are either suspects in many cases here and there, including drug trafficking, terrorism, or another repeat offenders here and there. Thank you.
The discovery by the activists, it does raise questions about how they came about the recoveries. Have they said anything pertaining to this?
The divers operating there are the ones who first discovered the bodies. They have been discovering them and calling police. Police could come and pick them. Now it reached a peak when the number raised to, I mean, it was, you can say it was one villager who was popular, or rather who was repeatedly finding them as a particular spot. So he's the one who raised the alarm, informed local activists in near the place called Siaya in Western Kenya. So the activists now raised the alarm using social media, saying their bodies were found there, because even the diver, the so-called diver in the area, had said the numbers are increasing on a daily basis. Actually, today, 2 more were found, though it was a skull of a human being and another more bones which are found in the waters, raising the number to probably 21 in the last couple of months. And as much as the state is saying is 2 years, but those people there, they're saying is since July last year. But then now it raises many questions, and because the explanation being given by the state does not hold, because the activists, the witnesses are saying the body counts, we have been getting them here since last year, July. And last year, the local mortuary had to offload 9 bodies which were there unidentified so that they can get more space to preserve the ones which had been recovered from the river. This is because the ones recovered from the river, they were pending under investigation. Rather, they are unidentified. I mean, no one was coming there to identify them. So it's a case pending under investigation. So far, that's why it is now.
All right, then, Kenyan journalist Sarah Sambachi, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Still to come on Network Africa. Ghana denies alleged plan to host UK asylum seekers. More details after the break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio has sacked the Attorney General, who is also the Justice Minister. Although no reasons have been given by the presidency, local media is linking the sacking to the pardoning of prisoners on New Year's Day and photos of the Attorney General with one of the freed inmates. In the meantime, Anthony Yewo Brewer has been replaced by Mohamed Lamin Trawali. Local media reports that Mr. Brewer sat on a committee that made recommendations to the president for the pardoning of 160 inmates. The Attorney General was then pictured at his house with Bayamba Moifore, who had been convicted of the murder of a DJ, which sparked outrage. Fore's pardoning has since been revoked. Mr. Brewer has not commented about the photos or his sacking. Zandile Christmas Mafe, who is accused of setting fire to South Africa's parliament, is being released from a psychiatric hospital and moved to a regular prison from where he can request bail. This follows a decision by a high court which said that his referral to a psychiatric hospital in Cape Town to undergo 30 days of evaluation was unlawful. Prosecutors say they had a report that he suffered from paranoia, a diagnosis both he and his lawyers have rubbished. Judge President John Mfule said on Tuesday that the further detention of Mr. Mafe is unlawful and should come to an end with immediate effect. The 49-year-old has denied setting the Parliament building in Cape Town ablaze. Is due to apply for bail on Saturday. The World Health Organization's chief, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, is warning that the narrative of Omicron being a mild disease is misleading, and this is hurting the overall response even as the variant continues to sweep the world. Speaking to reporters in Geneva, Dr. Tedros said there were more than 18 million reported cases last week. He said the number of deaths remains stable for the moment, but expresses concern about the impact Omicron is having on already exhausted health workers and overburdened health systems.
Omicron continues to sweep the world. Last week, there were more than 18 million reported cases. The number of deaths remains stable for the moment, but we're concerned about the impact Omicron is having on already exhausted health workers and overburdened health systems. In some countries, cases seem to have peaked, which gives hope that the worst of this latest wave is done with, but no country is out of the woods yet. I remain particularly concerned about many countries that have low vaccination rates, as people are many times more at risk of severe illness and death if they're unvaccinated. Omicron may be less severe, on average of course, but the narrative that it is mild disease is misleading, hurts the overall response, and costs more lives.
To other stories now, Ghana has denied reports that it would consider hosting a processing centre for asylum seekers on behalf of the United Kingdom. Several British news outlets had reported that the UK was drawing up plans to send thousands of asylum seekers to countries such as Ghana and Rwanda for processing and resettlement in a pact dubbed Operation Dead Meat. However, in a statement on Twitter, Ghana's foreign ministry said it had not engaged with the UK on the matter and did not intend to consider any such operation in the future. The African Union last year opposed the exportation of asylum seekers from Europe to Africa, terming the move xenophobic and completely unacceptable. Meanwhile, deferred asylum seekers in Israel are hopeful after a court ruling that made over 2,400 Sudanese asylum seekers eligible for temporary residency status last month. Sabona Mohammed Hassan is one of those who's been living in immigration limbo in Israel for 11 years after he fled his native conflict-ridden country. Now Hassan is hopeful for a positive change.
When he was 8, Sabona Mohammed Hassan says men on horseback rode through his village in Sudan's troubled Darfur region, killing, looting, and torching homes with people trapped inside. Separated from his family, Hassan says he fled from Sudan to Egypt and on through the Sinai Desert into Israel, where he has been living in immigration limbo for 11 years. Now, the 26-year-old can breathe a sigh of relief. He is one of the 2,440 Sudanese asylum seekers who have been made eligible last month for temporary residency status in Israel. Now, the 26-year-old can breathe a sigh of relief. He is one of the 2,440 Sudanese asylum seekers who were made eligible last month for temporary residency status in Israel.
What's new about this court decision is that it changes the rules of the game. Until now, the administration gave, for different reasons, A5 visas to asylum seekers in the past, but not in these numbers. And also, it gave them voluntarily, as if it's a gift that the government could give. The court order changes this and says you government have an obligation under international law and under Israeli law, and if you don't abide by it, then we, the court, we, the judges, will give these rights until you decide to do your job. That is a game changer in Israeli refugee law and in Israeli, even in administrative law.
Hassan received his new document on December 29th, one day before the deadline that Israel's Supreme Court gave immigration authorities to end delays in processing asylum requests that amounted, the court said, to keeping applicants on a cloud of uncertainty.
I want to visit my mom. This is the one of the important kids. So like 18 years. So I've been like each of 8 years old until now. I couldn't tell my family members, and it's so crazy, it's so horrible to waiting for this moment. So I hope soon as possible to see my family members.
The effect on their lives can be immediate, enabling them to own a business, drive, secure health care and social security, and to travel abroad.
My plan for the future in Israel, I can get married. Now I'm 26 now, so I can't be single anymore. And yeah, the document is going to help me to do a lot of stuff in this country.
An immigration authority spokesperson said the new status given to migrants from Sudan's Darfur, Blue Nile and Nuba Mountains regions will be in effect until a final ruling is made on the asylum request. Darfur's conflict erupted in 2003 when rebels took up arms against Sudan's government, accusing it of neglecting the arid western region. Khartoum mobilized militias to crush the revolt, unleashing a wave of violence that Washington said amounted to genocide. The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, says there are 41,538 asylum seekers, refugees, and other populations of concern in Israel, 6,067 of them from Sudan.
There must be a clear advocacy for women and significant investment in women human rights defenders and peace builders in the world. That's according to UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet, who spoke to the UN Security Council. She explains that decisions on peace that do not reflect women's voices, realities and rights are not sustainable.
Decisions on peace that do not reflect women's voices, realities, and rights are not sustainable. There must be clear advocacy for and significant investment in women's human rights defenders and peace builders, removing obstacles such as the digital divide, expanding financial support, and significantly increasing accountability for attacks and intimidation. The work of addressing discrimination, inequality, denials of women's civic space, and gender-based violence should also be viewed as a priority for building peace. I urge the Security Council to ensure that perpetrators of human rights violations and abuses in Afghanistan, including against women and girls, are held to account to enable conditions for sustainable peace. I ask all states to use their influence with the Taliban to encourage respect for fundamental human rights. I further call on states to create safe pathways and resettlement programs for Afghan women human rights defenders and to immediately halt the deportation of Afghan women who seek protection. It is also vital to maintain a strong human rights presence and focus for all UN engagement in Afghanistan, with strong advocacy and tangible support for women human rights defenders and peace builders and for women's human rights.
That's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Bye for now.